what seems to be very weird about the League of Legends scene is that there seems to be just no negative press at all. And when I say negative press, I don't mean like TMZ or some shit, right? Of like drama, clickbait type shit. I mean like actual critical criticism, right? And so, like in my previous video talking about I will dominate and LS and just content creators being more negative and how they're just more noticeable because the scene has been quite lacking in quote unquote, negative voices. So too is there a gap when it comes to journalists or writers. Name me a current journalist or writer or, video content creator, etc. in esports that is both negative or critical. Okay, yeah, so we got Thorin down. Anyone else? Because it virtually doesn't exist. And that's very strange, and it's weird that no one is asking this question of why is that the case. Now, obviously, the clear argument against this is that, well, yeah, of course there's no negative press or anyone that's critical because then you'd be denied interviews, right? This is completely false, and it's not demonstratable because, so let's compare this to Travis and Thorin, right? Like these are the primary examples that people would allude to, right? Both are quite big figures, both pull large numbers, yet we clearly see, one is like fucking the Jedi Order and the other is the Sith, right? So why does Thorin still capable of pulling all these interviews then with his reflection series? He shouldn't be able to do that, right? Because he's so negative about teams or about players. And then why is it always the argument that Travis isn't negative because that would impact his ability to get interviews? It's clearly not the case with Thorin, so why would it be the case with Travis at all? So now, okay, the better thing would be, at least the better argument would be, well, Thorin is a very large figure, right? So what happens if you aren't as big as him and you're still negative, you're still critical about players or teams or whatnot? Well, then pro players or pro teams don't know your negative content exists in the first place because you're a small fish, you're a small fry, right? So why would they care about you producing that content to begin with? It doesn't attract any views anyways, and they probably don't know it exists. They also don't even need to acknowledge that it exists, because it's not being discussed in the broader space of the community anyways. So why would it matter in the grand scheme of things? So both at the high end of the Thorns and the Travises, and both at the low end, it really doesn't matter to fucking begin with, right? Because you have all the numbers and you're able to pull all the weight and whatnot, and at the bottom end, no one fucking notices anyways. So why does it matter in the broader context of it? It just doesn't make any sense. On top of all this, every writer and interviewer or journalist, right, all the press know that an interview, it's not about being negative or rather grilling someone, right? It's about getting to these questions answered that both the community or maybe yourself, because you're an expert at asking questions, would like to know about, right? You want to know about how a team plays or maybe the inner team dynamics or whatnot. And, obviously this varies from skill level of the journalist or the interviewer themselves, but that's why you do an interview anyways. It's not to be overly critical against a player or a team. So now it becomes, okay, well, why don't the press do this, right? Why don't journalists or interviewers be more critical? I think, first of all, there is the idea that they fear that they lack a certain amount of game knowledge, right? And this might actually be true for some, right? To where they just simply don't know enough to even attempt to comment about a player or a team or maybe their play style or how they played the game or whatnot. I get that. That might actually be true. That's fair, but I actually don't think that exists in the broader context when we're just talking about the press at large, because a lot of them are full-time League of Legends interviewers or journalists or writers. So if they've been watching a lot of different games and they've actually been keeping up with their, domestic league or whatnot, that shouldn't be the case at all. They should at least have some idea as to how a team is performing or maybe a player is performing or whatnot. So why can't they comment on that? It doesn't make any sense. Like me personally, I'm not the most knowledgeable when it comes to, macro, or I guess micro, in fact, of League of Legends concepts or whatnot. Like hell, like I peaked plat 2. Well, to be exact, 100 LP plat 2. All right, get it right. But point being that obviously I'm not anywhere near being at a pro level. So like, why should I be able to criticize them, right? But that doesn't mean I can't comment on team dynamics, storylines, broader macro concepts, right, of how like a team should be going for this dragon or how they set up vision or whatnot, right? Like, it doesn't mean that I can't comment on that shit. Like, I think that the press should at least be able to learn from those who have done it before them, right? A great example would be Monte Cristo. He's famously said multiple different times, that he's never been high rank in League of Legends, and he's never tried to actually criticize or focus upon the micro concepts of what a player might do within a lane phase or how they're doing trades or whatnot. He focuses on the broader macro concepts because he studied so many different VODs, right? Thousands of different games he's actually watched and analyzed. And, obviously he casted a whole bunch of different games too. So naturally he's going to watch a lot of different VODs. And so he ended up going harder and harder into the macro concepts. So why can't that be the case for league writers or interviewers or whatnot? You have to watch the fucking games anyways. You see what's going on the map. You know exactly how a team is kind of posturing, or maybe when they fuck up because, it happened to be that they got one kill and they died 3 people, right? Obviously something wrong happened. So why can't writers or journalists or interviewers comment on that aspect? It doesn't make any sense. So now you come to the other aspect of maybe why there is no negative or critical press. Fear of getting flamed by fans, or specifically fans of that player or that team. I think this is probably one of the larger reasons as to why this doesn't happen. And realistically, that's just something you got to get over personally with, right? Turn off Twitter notifications if you have to, or don't read YouTube comments, or don't go into Reddit threads of your own content. Whatever you have to do to shield yourself, I don't think it's a problem, because everyone has some point to where they need to avoid flame, right? Like there's some barrier of resistance to where all of us are susceptible to criticism about, our content or even just our actions in life, right? And in the broader context of social media, it's like you're exposed to a lot of different people's shit, and they might talk shit about your content or just even your views in general, right? But this shouldn't be a valid reason why you shouldn't make a piece of content. The greater good of your piece, or rather the truth that you believe, right? Because otherwise you really wouldn't be espousing it, unless you're trying to espouse lies, which then you're doing something more nefarious. But it should, in fact, outweigh the backlash from the fans or whatnot, right? Or the community. That's what it is to be a journalist anyways, right? Or to be in the press. It's to espouse the truth. So many writers, journalists, and content creators, they end up complaining about Reddit, right? Reddit is probably the main criticism because that is the public square for the most part within League of Legends, because the subreddit is so fucking big. But they complain about Reddit being a hive mind, or social media being a landscape for groupthink. So if you do think that cycle is perpetuated and becomes harder to break the longer you let it go on, you're contributing to the problem. How do you not see this? If you aren't able to express your own opinion, especially if the opinion is critical of something or negative of something, why aren't you allowed to espouse that? So get it out, right? Challenge the consensus, right? Like, produce works addressing weaknesses or problems about players or teams. The problem of the lack of diverging opinions isn't going to fix itself, right? So, and finally, as just a last little tidbit, if you're worried about the overall hits or the views or whatever, just get the fuck out of the field of writing, journalism, video content, whatever, interviewing. Let your head editors worry about that. That should actually be the last of your concern.